and welcome to Fineprint. Europe is seeing some unprecedented times. There's a full-fledged war going on. A mutiny has been diffused days back, and a man who is often called the last dictator of Europe has become a peacemaker. It has been more than 3 days since the Wagner group called off the rebellion. The chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has even reached Belarus. But the 24-hour-long mutiny is all Moscow can talk about. President Vladimir Putin had made 3 addresses in the last 24 hours. First to the national public, second to the Russian troops, and third to the top military brass. And throughout the speeches, he has had one aim: to project a sense of unity.
People who were drawn into the revolt saw that the army and the people were not with them. The fast and coordinated deployment of security regiments allowed us to prevent a highly dangerous situation from developing in the country. From the very beginning of the events, on my direct order, steps were taken to avoid a big bloodshed. You defended the constitutional order, life, security and freedom of our citizens, saved our homeland from turbulence, de facto stopped the civil war.
Putin says the people did not support the attempted mutiny. While that may be true, Prigozhin has definitely emerged as a hero, not for his action, but for his personality.
You could say that he is quite a controversial person, but I really think that everything he does is for the good of the country. But he's a controversial person. I cannot right now formulate a normal opinion of him.
You know, I probably like him as a person because the man showed a certain resilience. Besides, he could not have gone to such measures without any reason. From the statehood point of view, he is completely wrong, of course.
The mutiny, while it lasted, was chaotic, and the aftermath is nothing less. So what is Belarus gaining from this chaos? Alexander Lukashenko has been Putin's rock, from becoming a launch pad for Russia's invasion of Ukraine to supporting through thick and thin in the past 16 months. It is diplomacy at its best. One could say this is how favors work. Over the years, Putin has helped Lukashenko quash all kinds of dissent in Belarus, and now Minsk is returning the favor. But Lukashenko is attempting something more here. He is going to heavily benefit from Wagner fighters' combat experience. So this is a win-win for the last dictator of Europe. Lukashenko has emerged as a savior of Putin, and while doing that, he is eyeing a boost to his political clout at home and on the global stage. Let's talk more about this latest development. Jonathan Wachtel is the Director of Communications and Senior Policy Advisor at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations. Jonathan is joining us live from New York. Hello, Jonathan, and welcome to WION World is One. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Eric. Just a little clarification. I'm the former Director of Communications for the U.S. Mission to the United Nations. And by the way, I was a journalist in the former Soviet Union for about 6 years. So this is a very familiar scene for me.
All right. Thank you very much for that correction, Jonathan. And it's good to have you on the program. Now, it is now confirmed that Yevgeny Prigozhin is in Belarus, despite the President Alexander Lukashenko saying that his country's military are being put at full combat readiness after the Wagner mutiny in Russia. What does Belarus seek to gain from this aborted mutiny?
You know, Belarus is, of course, a member of the United Nations and looked upon as within that organization as an independent country. But the truth is that since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Belarus has been in the pocket in terms of influence of the Kremlin, very close alliance. So, you know, what happens in Russia these days. What happens to Putin happens to Lukashenko in Minsk. They are attached at the hip, and their fates are intertwined.
Jonathan, what impact will this aborted mutiny have on the Baltic nations going forward?
On the Baltic nations, it will give them more resolve on how happy they are that they joined NATO. When the Soviet Union collapsed, they have the protection of NATO, and they are actively participating in supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. So it doesn't change a whole lot other than give affirmation that their massive neighbor who once held sway in their own countries needs to be kept check, and probably gives them all the more resolve to continue to support Ukraine in the war against Russia.
Jonathan, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, did make a speech earlier today. He says that he plans to disarm Yevgeny Prigozhin's private force. Will that not elicit another rebellion? What do you think about the timing of Putin's latest statement amidst the war in Ukraine?
The basic truth, Eric, is that as long as Vladimir Putin is the commander-in-chief, he controls the military of Russia, which is massive and strong and capable of crushing any sort of rebellion. So the disarming of Prigozhin's mercenaries is something that, given what has transpired, is to be expected. It was always a rather odd relationship to have mercenaries fighting for the Russian army in a foreign country, essentially. And though mercenaries are part and parcel of what happens on a geopolitical scale in other countries and meddling in their internal affairs, we're talking about Russia. We're talking about one of the world's major military mights. And to have a group that is not within the actual infrastructure of the Russian military was rather odd even at the onset. They have been extremely effective on the ground in fighting in Ukraine. It certainly is going to be a blow to be disarming any force that's fighting Ukrainian troops to try to have some sort of advantage on the front line. So this is a very difficult situation for Vladimir Putin in terms of his aspirations on crushing Ukraine and the power of Zelensky.
All right, I've been talking to Jonathan Wachtel. He is the former Director of Communications and Senior Policy Advisor at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations. Jonathan, thank you very much for giving us time today and for talking to WION World is One.
Pleasure.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.